Last time, we began chapter 4 of division E, entitled Rotary Motion and Symbolism, which focuses on the meaning of a series of familiar symbols, like the circle with a point in the center, which we covered last time, but only in terms of the material aspect and the sense of the body of the atom, whether that be an atom of substance or a human being, a planet, solar system, but these symbols just in relation to the actual physical aspect. For example, we learned that a circle divided into two marks the point where active rotation and the beginning of the mobility of the atom is achieved, compared to the point in the center of the circle, which is the beginning phases, what DK calls the tamasic phases of the atom, or inertia phases. That's always the initial phase. The symbol itself of the circle divided into two represents that point in time when the extension of the influence of the central point reaches the periphery and begins to radiate, thus making possible connection with other atoms, no matter what type of atom, through an inflow and outflow of force. We then took a look at the circle divided into four, which DK calls the true circle of matter, the equal-armed cross of the Holy Spirit, and the personification of active intelligence. But this symbol also represents the stage where matter demonstrates in four dimensions, which is a quality of revolution, sometimes called a wheel turning upon itself. So it actually represents in the career of an atom of substance moving through its form aspect. It's a fairly late stage. The stage, we're told, is slowly being achieved during the fourth round and in this fourth chain. So again, you have this correlation with the numbers. 4 dimensions, 4-dimensionality, and being achieved during this fourth chain. You can therefore surmise that it was during the third chain and the third round that full three-dimensionality, that is real physical outer being, was achieved. We then learned about spirale and the permanent atoms with which they are associated. DK says, the spirale, therefore, are but streams of force, or second aspect vitality, which circulates geometrically within the circumscribing walls of substance. This info relates to the symbol of the circle divided into four through the fact that, quote, when the fifth spirale, or fifth stream of force in an atom, becomes developed, man can conceive of a fourth dimensional rotary motion. We then learned about the personality ray deals with the first 4 spirale, the egoic ray with the 5th and 6th spirale, and the monadic ray is the source of the stimulation of the 7th spirale. Through soul contact and the ensuing stimulation of the 5th spirale, the rhythmic or satmic phase is activated. So you see here, it's kind of a correlation of 4 different systems, right? The symbols, the passage from inertia to rhythm, and then all these intermediary descriptions of the stage of that atom of substance, whatever it may be. And then the unfolding or the stimulation and activation of the spirale. He doesn't talk much about the first through fourth spirale in terms of how they relate to these different phases, but we can assume that first that the activation of the first spirale is connected with this inertial stage, and that the fourth is in the later stages of mobility. Just where the second and third come in, we don't know. But maybe most importantly, the fifth spirale is activated by the soul at this stage, this sattvic stage of rhythm, which begins the disintegration of the form, production of obscuration, separation of spirit and matter, etc. Okay, let's see here now. Where am I? Okay. We then learned, let's see here. We then took a look at the swastika, which represents the, quote, fire extending not only from the periphery to the center in four directions, but gradually circulating and radiating from and around the entire periphery. This is the last stage of an atom of substance having its own separative integrity before it merges back with the emanating spirit. The swastika represents the last stage in the journey of the form aspect before, quote, the wheel is consumed and there is not remaining but perfected fire. So here are the symbols for the 5 stages of matter, which demonstrate through tamas, rajas, sattva, and finally, and all of these are also stages in the stimulation of the 7 spirale. Actually, really, the stimulate the first 5 of the 7 spirale. The last 2 are stimulated beyond the form aspect. We then began the last chapter of the division entitled Motion and the Centers, which is divided into 5 subsections called the nature of the centers in the rays, the centers in Kundalini, the centers and the senses, and the centers and initiation. We're going to be here for quite a while working through these subsections of this 5th chapter. DK then relates the 5 kingdoms of nature with the 5 planes and the 5 senses. And this takes us up to where we left off last time. So, I encourage you today to, anytime you have any questions, any observations, any thoughts at all, it's always more interesting, when we have a dialogue than when I'm just lecturing at you for an hour and a half. So speak up, and we'll have more fun doing all this. Okay, so could we get a reader for this first section?
Yeah, Gordon, you want to read?
Yes. By the time the 5th round is reached, 3/5 of the human family will have attained at this point and will have their 5 senses fully functioning on the 3 planes in the 3 worlds, leaving the 2 other planes to be subjugated during the remaining 2 rounds. I would here point out a fact that is little realized, that in this 5-fold evolution of man and in this solar system, the 2 remaining rounds in any planetary cycle and the 6th and 7th root races in those cycles are always synthetic. Their function is to gather up and synthesize that which has been achieved in the earlier 5. For instance, in this root race, the 6th and 7th subraces will synthesize and blend that which the earlier 5 have wrought out. The analogy lies in the fact that in this solar system, the 2 higher planes, the logoic and the monadic, are synthetic.
Thank you. Okay, first up, by the time the 5th round is reached. Okay, those of you who have been following the Secret Doctrine webinar series have been learning about schemes, chains, rounds, root races, and sub races. But for those of you who haven't, let's do a quick review of this nomenclature. So each planetary scheme is made up of 7 chains. Here's the Earth scheme, and you can see 3 inner chains and 4 outer chains, making up 7 chains. The middle or 4th chain of the Earth scheme is shown here. This is just diagrammatic of progression through the chain. Each of these chains, which this represents, is made up of 7 rounds, as you see here, 1 through 7. Each round is made up of 7 globes. And finally, each globe has 7 root races, shown here by the tiny circles dotting the perimeter of globe D on each of the rounds. So it's a septenary system that's taken from, starting with the 7 planets, and then within each planet, 7 chains, 7 rounds in each chain, 7 globes of each round, and 7 root races, and even 7 sub-races of each of these root races. Right now, we're in the 5th root race, which is indicated by the arrow. So when DK says, by the time the 5th round is reached, he's referring to the next passage of the life wave through the 7 globes, right? We're in this 4th round here, or right in the middle of the 4th round. So he's referring to the entire next passage through the 7 globes. This will be obviously a very, very long time from now, since it will be encompass 3 globes made up of 23 more root races before we even get to the 5th round. In other words, we still have to go through globes 5, 6, and 7, each with 7 root races, right, before we even begin the 5th round. And this, it sounds like it's right around the corner, by the time the 5th round is reached, but it's in fact eons of time away. Does everybody understand? Just generally speaking, I don't expect you to have an absolute total grasp of the idea of schemes, chains, rounds, and globes and root races. But if you have a general sense of it, it helps, especially during this part of Cosmic Fire. So if you have any questions, it's going to be somebody else who also doesn't understand it. So ask your questions.
Question from Helios. What does it mean, synthetic?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm going to be covering that right now. So, and I see Maria Christina. So we'll be reading about the meaning of synthetic as it deals with especially the 6th and 7th iteration, whether it's a root race, a globe, or a chain. And we'll be talking about that momentarily. And I see Maria Christina. Yes.
I know I could have already spoken on a couple of, even on or questioned the duality, but I'm just going to skip that. The images that you gave on the duality with the feet going across, you could also do it up and down, that and that means something else. But here I do get wonder, and it isn't even here per se, because sometimes some of these globes within the Earth scheme are not physical globes, like sometimes the Viennese
Right.
scheme and so on is talked about, and that's where sometimes they're talking etherically, right? They're not
Absolutely.
in physical manifestation.
Yeah, I mean, if you use the term etheric just to mean non-physical, then
Right.
it really is only um, this. This here. Let me go back so I can get on this. Yeah, it's really on this globe, which is what um, these 7 root races of this globe. It's only on this globe that's truly dense physical. The
Okay.
nature, of the substance of the other quote unquote physical globes, which are called globe D, are actually not at all physical from our point of view, even though they're the densest globe of those rounds. So, the dense globe D on the first round is, from our point of view, really quite etheric, right? And so the general nature of these rounds is fiery for the first, airy for the second, watery for the third, earthy for the fourth, and then back to watery, airy, and fiery. However, it's not really how we understand these elements. In other words, the astral plane is not made of literal physical water, and neither is the third and the fifth rounds. It's a substance that is akin to water in terms of how it uh, relates to our dense physical, but it's not literally watery. Same thing with airy. The Buddhic plane is considered airy. But it's not our literal air. So yeah, I'm glad you made that point, Maria Christina. Yeah. Um, Anyone else? Any thoughts? We've talked about this quite a bit in A Secret Doctrine, but review never hurts. Okay, we were here. Hang on a sec. Yeah. So we were talking about just this one phrase in order to understand this concept of the fifth round. Okay. Okay, next. By the time the fifth round is reached, 3/5 of the human family will have attained this point and will have their 5 senses fully functioning on the 3 planes in the 3 worlds. So before we analyze this statement, let's take a look at a more complete explanation from both later in TCF and in Initiation Human and Solar. Could we get a reader for this, please? Hello, could we get a reader, please?
Yeah. Joe, do you want to read?
Right?
He did. Hi.
Hi.
In the next round, all the previous stages will be recapitulated, and Manas will demonstrate in ways inconceivable as yet to the half-awakened consciousness of man. In that round, 3/5 of the human family will be fully aware, functioning with uninterrupted continuity of recollection on the physical, astral, and lower mental planes. The emphasis of, could you move the arrow for me? Oh, it's my arrow. The emphasis of monastic evolution will be laid upon the achievement of causal consciousness and upon the scientific construction of the bridge which should unite the causal vehicle and the permanent monastic atom on the abstract levels.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, and then this next passage, another reader, please.
Julius, do you feel like reading?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Mhm. This particular mode of developing the consciousness of the human family, initiation, was initiated by the hierarchy during the Atlantean root race at the later end of the fourth subrace and will persist until the middle of the next round. At that time, the needed stimulus will have been imparted, and as 3/5 of the human family will then have esoterically set their feet upon the path, and a large percentage of them will then be in process of becoming the path itself, the more normal routine will again be resumed. I'm not sure what IHS stands for, as I'm new.
IHS stands for Initiation Human and Solar, which is the book that
Thank you.
this came from. It was actually DK's first book.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, does everybody have some understanding of what he's talking about here in terms of what's going to be happening? This phrase describes it will be fully, humanity, the human family will be fully aware, function, and with uninterrupted continuity of recollection on the physical, astral, and lower mental planes. That is an extraordinary stage of becoming. That's related somewhat to what happens now at the third initiation. This idea of continuity of consciousness, and that will be achieved in this distant period. Okay, so the interval between our current fifth root race and on round 4, where we are here, indicated by the arrow, and the middle of round 5, which is when these events are predicted, includes the rest of this root race, plus the 6th and 7th root race on our current globe, plus an additional 7 globes, these 3 and these 4, which is about 49 and a half root races. Since root races last many millions of years, we're talking about eons of time before 3/5 of the human family will have their 5 senses fully functioning on the 3 lower planes. Okay? All right. Next up, leaving the 2 other planes to be subjugated during the remaining 2 rounds. Here are the remaining 2 rounds, which include 14 globes, 98 root races, after which DK here tells us the 5 lower subplanes of the cosmic physical plane will be mastered. That's up through the Atmic plane, which is where our current masters of wisdom work, right? They're actually working to attain full consciousness on the Atmic plane at this level of master of wisdom. So he's, even though he doesn't directly say it, DK's suggesting that by the end of this chain, the 7th round of this chain, 3/5 of the human family will have become masters of wisdom, will be functional all the way up through the Atmic planes. Pretty extraordinary statement. Of course, it's a very, very, very long time. Okay, next, I would here point out a fact that is little realized, that in this fivefold evolution of man, and in this solar system, the two remaining rounds in any planetary cycle, and the 6th and 7th root races in those cycles are always synthetic. So this is going to address your question about synthesis. Their function is to gather up and synthesize that which has been achieved in the earlier five. So the fivefold evolution of man includes Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, as well as the lower quaternary. The term synthesis suggests both full awareness on and a full integration of all aspects of the five lower planes of the cosmic physical plane. This illustration depicts the 6th and 7th root races of our round and the two remaining rounds of this chain, the 6th and 7th, during which ever greater degrees of synthesis will take place. A preview of the synthesis that will be brought about during the 6th and 7th rounds will occur during the 6th and 7th sub-races of our 5th root race. So, again, it highlights the importance of numerology here, right? That it doesn't matter at what level you're speaking, whether it's a sub-race, a root race, or a round, the 6th and 7th iterations of those are synthetic to the degree of what they're working with, right? Certainly the synthesis that'll take place in the last round of this chain will be massive compared to the synthesis that will take place in the sub-races of our 5th root race. But they all are driven by this same quality of synthesis. Okay, hang on a second. So each lesser cycle, right? For instance, the subrace is a lesser cycle than a root race, and a root race is a lesser cycle than a globe. Each lesser cycle acts as a seed or germ for the greater cycle, for the coming greater cycle. For example, the 6th subrace acts as a germ or plants the seed for the future 6th root race. And an example, and DK gives us a specific example of this. He says, the United States fulfills the same office for the 6th or coming subrace, that's in our 5th root race, 6th subrace, which is the germ race for the future 6th great race, the 6th subrace, and the 6th root race, whilst Brazil will function as the leading division of that great 6th race, suggesting that in the first, the qualities of synthesis, which are determined by the law of love and attraction, will occur, first of all, in the United States, and that will plant a seed which will, at a much later time, take hold and bear fruit in Brazil, which will be the seat of the 6th root race. Right? Next, for instance, in this root race, the 6th and 7th subraces will synthesize and blend that which the earlier 5 have wrought out. The analogy lies in the fact that in this solar system, the two higher planes, the logoic and the monadic, are synthetic. Okay, the monadic plane, ruled by second ray Jupiter, is the plane of universal love. and is thus directly related to the sixth law, the law of love. The logoic plane, the highest plane, is the plane of at-one-ment, synthesis, final triumph, and obscuration, and is thus related to the law of sacrifice and death, and to the sattvic stage of becoming. The sixth subrace of our fifth root race will respond to the merging quality of the law of love. That's the US in the sixth subrace, and then later the actual sixth root race in Brazil. They will both respond to this law of love, and the seventh subrace to the law of sacrifice and death. So let's, Greg, yes, you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm not blowing everything out. Okay, so we have to think in terms of sub races versus root races, because we still have to work out our own sub races on this round, which is the fifth round, right? No, the fourth. I think we're the fifth round right now, or are we the fourth round? But in any case,
Fourth round.
Here on Earth, we have to work out and synthesize everything that was before the lower four subplanes in order to synthesize and prep ourselves for the incoming seventh root race, which will be eons from now, and it will begin in Brazil. So,
Okay, wait a minute. Let me restate what you're saying, because it's some of it's correct, some of it's not. Okay. First of all, we're in the fifth subrace of the fifth root race. It's a very monastic time of development. You know, you have this double emphasis on the number 5, which is monastic in character, right? When the sixth subrace of this fifth root race starts to come into incarnation, which could possibly happen even during the Aquarian age, you'll have this introduction of the illumined mind, which is ruled by the law of love, and that will have the quality of beginning the process of synthesizing all that's gone before in this root race, all the first 5 stages, the first 5 sub-races of this root race, right? And those, Atlantis was the entire previous root race, but we're just talking about within this monastic race, the first 5 sub-races will be synthesized. The beginning of that will be synthesized by the 6th. That, DK tells us, will begin or will be dominant in the United States. And then that will then plant the seed, which will finally manifest as the actual 6th root race, which will take hold in Brazil, really in another era. It won't be called Brazil then, because we're talking about millions of years hence, right? The 7th, which you mentioned, is a much, much further distant time than that, because you will have to go through all 7 sub-races of the 6th root race,
right.
before we get to
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that clarified things a lot more, and it's
Okay.
almost like time seems to expand as we develop the higher root races, because the 6th root race could be eons and eons, and you have to go through all the rounds again, and then the 7th root race is
No. You're mixing apples and oranges
Oh,
here.
sorry. Okay.
It's all right. Let me go back. It's important enough. So we'll just use this big illustration on the left is one round, just generically, it's a round. A round has 7 root races in it. So between now and the 7th root race, we won't be going through a number of rounds. That's the bigger septenary, right? We'll be going through 7 sub races. We'll finish our 6th and 7th sub races during this root race, and then we'll move through 7 sub races during the 6th root race, and finally 7 sub races during the 7th root race. And then we'll move to the next round altogether.
Okay.
Next
Mhm.
round.
So it's
Right.
just way beyond comprehension
Way,
in
way
terms of
beyond any kind of
the
imagining.
time analysis, but
Right.
well, but then also what was really helpful, what you just said in your description, was that yes, there is new energy coming in the Atlantean age, but it's primarily still in our current round, and we are going to be working out the 6th and 7th sub races of the 5th root race, which will prepare us, and that's the 3/5 number.
Well, again, not quite. The 3/5 number doesn't happen until the middle of the next round at this stage.
Oh, okay. So that's even way out there again
It's
too. Okay.
way, way, way further. Yeah, we have to go through the rest of this globe in 2 entire globes before we move into the 5th round, and then we'll be going through the first 3 globes of that round before we achieve this status of the 3/5. So it's, Greg just illustrates, how confusing this can be, because it's so easy. That's why I kind of focused in here. It's so easy to mix the greater periods, cycles, with the lesser, right? And so it's just something that it took me quite a while. I had to really focus in to get it to understand the septenary relationship as you go up the scale, Yes, Maria Christina. Thanks for your question, Greg. It's clarifying. Like I said, if one person is having trouble understanding, you can bet there's 10 others. Maria Christina.
Yeah, well, here's one more of 10 others. Because so each round has 7 root races, and
Right.
each round has
No.
7 globes. No?
Each
Each
round.
globe has 7 root races.
Yeah, let's just look at this one that's lit up here, the 6th round. So these A, B, C, D, E, F, G are globes.
Right.
There's 7 globes in this round. On each of those globes, there are 7 root races. That's
Thank
what
you.
literal number.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
you can take this
Right.
and move it over here because there's also 7 root races on
Right.
globe A, B, C, E, F, and G, right? So that's
Right.
okay. And there's just one other fact, just if you thought you were getting clear on this, this might muddy the waters. It's the same 7 globes that are being passed through from round to round. There's only 7 globes in a chain, but they're revisited 7 times. That's why those are called rounds. They're revisited 7 times, and at each time, those globes that are revisited have advanced since the last visitation. So there's not 49 globes in a chain. There's only 7, but they're revisited 7 times. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Like I say, if you have questions, there's going to be a good chance that somebody else also is confused. So, yes, Vivienne. You might have to unmute.
Yes, I'm okay. So this means that our planet Earth will survive all of this. We do wonder sometimes when you listen to the news and think about things, you wonder if we're going to survive at all. But is this our actual planet Earth, or is it somewhere else?
This, where my cursor is down here in the left corner, this is Earth. That's globe D of the fourth chain is our actual planet Earth. There are 6 other planets that are associated with this fourth round that are more etheric versions that we will be, 3 we pass through and 3 we will pass into, right? So when we move to the next round, this globe D will again be this Earth, but it will be greatly transformed as a result of all the activity that has taken place since until that time, between those 2 iterations of globe D. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, anyone else? All right, let's take a look at this text, please. This further describes what happens in the 6th phase, whether that be a 6th root race, 6th subrace, a 6th globe, or a 6th round. So could we get a reader, please?
Greg,
Did you want me to read that?
Mikhail, did you call in Greg?
yeah. you
Okay,
said you
go
could
for
read.
it.
Okay. So read in the 6th chain of each scheme, this 6th law of love and the 6th ray have a very important significance, whilst the 7th chain of each scheme is always synthetic, love and activity in a perfect balance. The same effect can be demonstrated in the 6th round. In the 6th round of the present chain of the Earth scheme, the 6th law will demonstrate with great clarity and force, as love shown in brotherhood, love translated or transmuted from the astral to the Buddhic. So in the 6th root race and the 6th subrace, a similar analogy will be seen. Out of the shattered form of the 5th subrace of the 5th root race, built up under the 5th ray of concrete knowledge, with the aid of the 5th law of fixation, will emerge the 6th subrace of brotherly love, love shown in the realization of the one life latent in each son of God.
Thanks, Greg. So you get some idea of what's actually goes on during this 6th cycle, wherever it takes place, which is love demonstrates as brotherhood. It's love translated or transmuted from the astral to the Buddhic. That's a huge thing. It moves us from a emotionally polarized race, which even in this 5th root race, humanity is still largely emotionally polarized. That was as to be expected during Atlantean times, but because of the failure of that root race, we're still working through that process of being emotionally polarized, right? But in the 6th, even in the 6th subrace of this root race, this quality of brotherhood will emerge, and this lifting from the astral to the Buddhic plane will, in terms of consciousness, will begin to take place. Okay, any questions about that? Thoughts? Okay, and then this is so we're working with the 6th law and the quality of this and effect of love and brotherhood, which largely affects the astral and Buddhic plane, to the 7th law of sacrifice, which governs the 7th cycle. That starts with the 7th root race, the seventh globe, and finally the seventh round. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Kira.
Hello.
Hello.
The law of sacrifice and death. This law governs the gradual disintegration of concrete forms and their sacrifice to the evolving life, and it's closely linked in its manifestation with the seventh ray. This ray is the one that largely controls, that manipulates, that geometrizes, and that holds sway over the form side, governing the elemental force of nature. The physical plane is the most concrete exemplification of the form side. It holds the divine life imprisoned or enmeshed at its densest point, and it works at this time in line with the seventh law. In a mysterious way, this law is the reverse side of the first, or the law of vibration. It is Vulcan and Neptune in opposition, which is as yet an almost incomprehensible thing for us. The densest form of expression on the physical plane is, after all, but a form of synthesis. Just as the rarest form of expression on the highest plane is but unity or synthesis of a finer kind. One is the synthesis of matter, and the other the synthesis of life. This law governs the seventh chain in each scheme, each chain having achieved the fullest expression possible in the scheme, comes under the law of death, and obstruction and disintegration supervenes. In a cosmic sense and analogy, it is the law that governs the coming in of pralaya at the end of a system. It is the law that shatters the cross of the cosmic Christ and places the form of the Christ within the tomb for a period of time.
Thank you. Hang on just a sec. I've got to take care of something here. Okay. So any questions about this law? This is the governing law of the final cycle, the final synthesizing cycle. It's really the move from any type of form orientation and the last bastion of separativeness into the into spirit identification, right? So the law of death, of course, is from the perspective of the form aspect. It's from the perspective of the indwelling jiva. It's the law of liberation because you're finally released from any type of form. Okay, can we get a reader for this next passage, please?
Yeah, before that, Maria Christina asked, could you speak to Vulcan and Neptune in opposition?
Vulcan and Neptune in what?
Opposition.
Oh, gosh. Let's see. Oh, I'd have to think about it, Maria Christina. It's that's more of a question for a real astrologer, and which I'm not. I just am a big fan of the book Esoteric Astrology, but that type of question really would take a bona fide astrologer to more correctly answer. Yeah. Okay, could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Kirsten.
By the way, if there are any astrologers present and you have some insight on this, I like to make this as much a group process as is possible. Then, there's Joe. She's going to answer your question. Yay, Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Right. The thing that popped into my head was that Vulcan is the ruler, a hidden ruler of Virgo. And if one has Neptune in Virgo, one would have to work with that combination of energies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the moon can veil Neptune as well as Vulcan in Virgo. You have this unique situation where the moon is the esoteric ruler of Virgo. There's no other time when the moon is an esoteric ruler, right? But as esoteric ruler, the energy is what it's really doing is stepping down the energy of either or both Vulcan and Neptune. But that doesn't really directly answer your question about their what it means for them to be in opposition. So, anyone else? Joe, your hand's still up.
Sorry, I think I'm going to pass on that one. I had another thought, but I think it takes us astray.
Yeah. It's not directly related here. Can we get a reader for this short section, please?
One is the synthesizing plane for the logos from whence he abstracts the essence in manifestation. The other for the monad from whence the monad abstracts and garners the fruits of objectivity. We will therefore only concern ourselves here with those centers which relate to the evolution of the subtler bodies, the evolution of the psyche, and not with those connected with the evolution and propagation of the dense physical body.
So first, one is the synthesizing plane for the logos from which he abstracts the essence in manifestation. The other for the monad, from whence the monad abstracts and garners the fruits of objectivity. So during manifestation, the logoic plane that's the highest plane, carries the life essence, not through form as on the monadic plane, but as a synthesis of the informing triple logoic energy. In contrast, the monadic plane both initiates objectivity during the involutional stage, and then during the sixth cycle, right? Whether it be the six subrays, root rays, globe, round, or chain, draws back to itself through the law of attraction and the law of love that which has been sent forth. This is the idea of, the returning of the prodigal son. Next, we will therefore only concern ourselves here with those centers. Remember, this is a chapter on the nature of the centers, right? Which relate to the evolution of the subtler bodies, the evolution of the psyche, and not with those connected with the evolution and propagation of the dense physical body. So DK then gives a list of the centers. Absent from this list is the sacral center, the spleen, and interestingly, the ajna center, which we can thus infer do not directly relate to the evolution of the subtler bodies, but rather to the maintenance, creation and maintenance of the dense physical body. So can we get a reader for this list of centers?
Maria Cristina.
Actually, before you start, Maria
Oh,
Christina,
Helios.
you have a hand up,
I think Helios.
you know, soul voice.
Okay. These centers are 5 in number. 1. That at the base of the spine, the only one dealt with that has a physical effect. 2. That situated at the solar plexus, the most important one in the body from the standpoint of the astral plane. 3. That found at the throat, the most important from the standpoint of the mental plane. 4. That in the region of the heart, which has an occult link with the Buddhic plane. 5. That above the top of the head, which is the crown and has relation with the Atmic plane. We do not deal with the lower centers of generation, nor with the spleen, which has a direct connection with the etheric and is the transmitter of prana. They have been dealt with earlier.
Okay, thank you. So, the reader that just read is your handle Helios Soul Voice, or does Helios Soul Voice have a question to ask?
Yeah, that was her.
Oh, that was okay. I
But I
just
don't know
saw the
if
hand
she
up.
was just raising her hand to read.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so clearly the purpose of this list is to reveal the most relevant center for each of the planes. That's not normally how you look at the chakras, right? But in this list, he's going down and orienting them very specifically to each plane. So these 5 are also key initiating or transition centers for the Kundalini fire, which begins its upward journey from the base of the spine. So let's take a closer look. The base of the spine associated with the physical plane is the source of the latent fires of matter. And from it, radiations go forth along the 3 channels in the spine, the Ida, Pingala, and Shushumna, eventually resulting in the merging of the latent fire with the radiatory fire of prana, whose combined fires then mount to the Alta Major Center, where they merge with the fires of mind. The transference of the fires from the next center, the solar plexus, to the heart releases one from emotional control and thus from the grip of the astral plane. In a parallel transference, activation of the throat center, which radiates the fire of manas, synthesizes the entire personality life. The head center, associated with the Atmic plane, represents the energetic sum total of all the other centers. During the last stages of the raising of the Kundalini fire, the head center, along with the heart and throat centers, forms a field of attraction for the downflow of fire from the fire of spirit. This field of attraction corresponds with Atmi Buddhi Manas. Let's take a look at MDR's thoughts on this list. Could we get a reader?
Yeah, this one, Maria Cristina.
1. That at the base of the spine, the only one dealt with that has a physical effect. We see that the base of the spine does directly relate to the evolution of the subtler bodies as well as to the evolution of the psyche, though also to the propagation of the dense physical.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for just a second, Maria Christina. So the italics and the numbered are the actual text that describes the the center. And then the regular text that follows is what MDR says about them, just so you know.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, so text 2, that situated at the solar plexus, the most important one in the body from the standpoint of the astral plane, commenting, the solar plexus center is the most important from the standpoint of the vast majority of human beings, since they are polarized in the astral body. 3, that found at the throat, the most important from the standpoint of the mental plane. This center is focal for the intelligentsia of the human race. It is always interesting that the throat center, through its 16 petals, is often considered a lesser center than the heart center, which has 12 petals. Wow, that could be commented. Huh? Okay, you're not commenting. 4, that in the region of the heart, which has an occult link with the Buddhic plane. This is the center which relates a man to his higher self, to the solar angel, and to the spiritual hierarchy of the planet. We have often been taught that the heart center has a connection with the Buddhic plane. Why is this connection called an occult link? We do note that the physical heart is fourfold, that the heart center is the 4th center, and that the Buddhic plane is the 4th plane. 5, that above the top of the head, which is the crown, and has relation with the Atmic plane. Atma is the seat of spiritual will, a faculty directly connected to the head center. The Atmic plane is the nirvanic plane. It is clear that if one is to achieve nirvana, the crown center must be rightly activated. The achievement of samadhi also involves the abstraction of the energies of the lower centers into the crown center. Samadhi, the Atmic plane, nirvana, and the crown center are correlated. Okay, so that's it. The crown center, the Atmic plane, and the crown center again? Oh, the lower centers. I'm sorry. In a very simple yet illuminating manner, the planes connected with the centers have been given.
Okay, yeah, so, Michael he just makes notes as he's going along. It's, he's not trying necessarily to give a totally comprehensive understanding or information on the center. It's just a note that comes to mind, as he's going through the book. So I see a bunch of hands. So let's start with Carol.
Hi.
Hi.
My questions are mostly just about the one thing. I wanted to know where there's this reference about Kundalini, because I'm actually a healer too.
Carol?
Yeah.
Hang on. You're going in and out in terms of your voice. Could you get closer to your mic or I don't know what, but I only heard a little bit of that.
That's terrible. I'm wanting to know where this reference about Kundalini and the altar major chakra is, because I'm extremely interested in that as a healer.
Oh yeah, well, the best thing to do is do a word search in the Alice Bailey books for Alta Major, which is a center at the very top of the spine, and there's this.
I know.
You know where it is. Okay, yeah.
It's the brain stem, so that's why it's so crucial to know about this. And
So
are they saying they want that the Kundalini will go in there for the act to connect with the fires of the mind? Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, and actually, it's the merging of the lower fires, which is the latent fires and the pranic fires, merge with the fires of mind by means of this Alta Major center. So at that point, when that occurs, then immediately what happens is it draws down the spiritual fire, which demonstrates at the top of the head. But yeah, it's that final merging that takes place. You have to bridge the gap between the top of the spine and this alta major center in order for this to take place.
There's some feeling that it's being developed right now.
Uh-huh.
And it's very, if you Google things in India, they take a lot of interest in that chakra. They think it's the mouth of God. It's the main chakra, really, to them, which is interesting. It isn't here. And I wanted to double check, is it true that the Kundalini goes up the Sushumna?
Yes, it does. The white magician works predominantly with the Sushumna. It's the positively polarized of the three channels. And the black magician works with the Ida and the Pingala exclusively, and not with the Sushumna, which is animated by the soul. So that's an interesting aspect to it. This Kundalini work is also done by the Black Lodge, but it's done in a very, very different way. It's done just to stimulate lower mind, not to make a connection with the soul and the higher mind and the causal levels.
Fabulous. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Janet.
Thank you. I had a couple thoughts, but I'm hearing a lot of the cycles within the cycles. And when we brought up the Vulcan opposite Neptune, we have that every year at one point, and we get a glimpse. So it's like a tiny little glimpse of what would be happening if you have that type of intuition to expand what's going on around you. Would that be correct to say, to kind of understand?
Sounds right. Sounds right. But like I said, I can't comment specifically on that opposition. You have a 6-ray sacred planet opposite a first-ray sacred planet. So you have two different types of synthesizing planets. But their opposition is going to depend, how they affect you is going to depend on your chart as well. And like I say, you really, I have, it's a big difference between studying DK's book on esoteric astrology, which I do very closely, and actually being an esoteric astrologer where you have worked with clients your whole life and have come to understand what these oppositions actually mean. And I can't, I have not been that. So, yeah. That's why I, defer to esoteric astrologers on that type of question. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Marianne.
Deal fundamentally with fire aspects in man or with the divine spirit. They are definitely connected with the monad, with the will aspect, with immortality, with existence, with the will to live, and with the inherent powers of spirit. They are not connected with objectivity and manifestation, but with force or the powers of divine life. The correspondence in the macrocosmos can be found in the force which manipulates the cosmic nebula, and which by its whirling rotary motion eventually builds them into planets or spiritual bodies. These planets are each of them an expression of the will to live of some cosmic entity, and the force that swirled, that rotated, that built, that solidified, and that continues to hold a form coherent, is the force of some cosmic being.
Okay, thank you. So first up, the centers in the human being deal fundamentally with the fire aspect in man, or with his divine spirit. They are definitely connected with the monad, with the will aspect, with immortality, with existence, with the will to live, and with the inherent powers of spirit. So the centers are connected to the monad because the streams of fiery energy that make up the centers is initially transmitted from the monad to the ego, which in turn uses this fire to form the centers of the three lower vehicles during incarnation. In fact, another term for the etheric body is the body of fire. Next, they are not connected with objectivity and manifestation, but with force, or the powers of the divine life. This is an important statement. Increased activity of the fire within the 5 centers listed by DKA ultimately reunites the imprisoned jiva, the spark within, with the monad, whereas the activity of the omitted centers, like the sacral center and the spleen, foster physicality, which nonetheless cannot demonstrate outer existence without the animating presence of the fire of the first aspect. Next, the correspondence in the macrocosm can be found in the force which manipulates the cosmic nebulae, and which by its whirling rotary motion eventually builds them into planets or spheroidal bodies. So the force at work that DK is describing here is phohatic, which in its involutional phase works to bind spirit to matter, to quote unquote harden the atoms, whether those atoms are a human being, a planet, or a cosmic nebulae. And finally, these planets are each of them an expression of the will to live of some cosmic entity, and the force that swirled, that rotated, that built, that solidified, that built, that solidified, and that continues to hold and form coherent is the force of some cosmic being. So after formation through Fohat, which demonstrates as the various phases of electricity on which the subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, the planets, or any other articulated atom of consciousness come under the influence of the laws of attraction and repulsion, and thus begin to cycle through the influence of the 3 gunas, inertia, mobility, and rhythm. In the last or sattvic stage, the raising of the kundalini results in abstraction, obscuration, and the return to the emanating source, for the purpose that initiated the will to be has been served. Okay, next up, can we get a reader for this little short paragraph? I see a hand. Yes, Carol.
Yeah. Oh, let's see if she wants a question.
Are you racing to read, or?
Sorry, I no, I just wasn't mute. I was muted. This force originates on cosmic mental levels from certain great foci. There descends to the cosmic astral, forming corresponding cosmic focal points, and on the 4th cosmic etheric level, the Buddhic plane of our solar systems finds its outlet in certain great centers. These centers are again reflected or reproduced in the three worlds of the human endeavor, the heavenly man therefore has centers on three solar planes, a fact to be remembered.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, first, this force originates on cosmic mental levels from certain great foci there. So the force here described is the cosmic will to live. This will to live, also called the will to be, demonstrates as the electric fire of the first aspect, which emanates from cosmic mental levels, becomes colored by will/desire on the cosmic astral plane, and results in manifestation on the dense physical plane. DK says, will desire is the cause of incarnation. The will to be reacting on substance, whose main quality is desire or responsiveness to sensation, produces the forms through which the central life or existence seeks expression. When considering the will to be of a solar logos, the quote unquote certain great foci would be centered on the solar logoic causal plane. And can we get a reader for this? And then I'll grab your question, Greg.
Nisa.
We've seen that manas or mind is the fifth principle or the basic vibration of the cosmic mental plane, the fifth plane. It was therefore impulse originating from the causal levels of the cosmic mental plane, which drove our solar logos into manifestation in the same way that the force which brings man into incarnation emanates from his causal body on the mental plane of the solar system.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, Greg, what's up?
Okay, I've been doing a lot of work with the egoic lotus, and in terms of the highest level of the egoic lotus in the cosmic mental plane, which is where we are mostly trying to work through between beyond, I mean, from the first, second, and third and into the fourth initiations, we encounter what's called the monastic permanent atom. And I think what you just said, or what DK was just saying here, is that you're working on three levels, because the monastic permanent atom from the level of the egoic lotus, which defines our own spiritual orientation, one might say, that monastic permanent atom is also working the astral, working the Buddhic and Atmic planes, and the causal body of the solar logos, but it's also in terms of our human expression on the mental, we're working that same too, because when we begin to develop higher consciousness or awareness, aren't we going to be working, when we start to deal with permanent atoms, for one of the big things, when we can continue that process, are we then working Atmic and Buddhic levels, but only in our limited way, and that forms the manifestation in our own worlds and in these incarnations, as DK has said here, in terms of we have seen the manas, or mind is the fifth principle, and that we are originating from the causal levels, but we have our own very low based level or cosmic level, which is our causal body. So I hope did that make sense, what I was asking?
Well, I'll just comment in general about the monastic permanent atom. This is the goal of the Antakarana. So the permanent atoms that reflect our incarnation into the form aspect, that are how we're sent forth, are the mental unit, the astral permanent atom and the physical permanent atom. They are repositories for that information that allows us to reincarnate. The monastic permanent atom is not a reincarnational permanent atom, but it's, as the lowest point of the triad, it's actually the means by which we move from physical manifestation into a triadal being by building the antakarana, which you build between the mental unit and the monastic permanent atom. And in terms of what he's talking about here, which is the will to be of a solar logos, he's just drawing in this passage, he's drawing a parallel, an as above, so below parallel between the causal body of a solar logos emanating the solar logoic incarnation in the same way that a soul, using the lower permanent atoms, brings forth a physical incarnation of a human being. Okay, anyone else? Okay. So next up, this force originates the cosmic planes from certain great foci there, descends to the cosmic astral, forming corresponding cosmic focal points. These focal points would be in the solar logoic astral body. Most probably the energy descending from the cosmic mental plane activates the logoic astral head center as well as its astral heart center. There's no information about this, but it just follows that this is very likely the sequence. Since desire on the cosmic astral plane demonstrates as pure love, and of course our solar logos is a second-rate logos. Next, and on the fourth cosmic etheric level, the Buddhic plane of our solar system finds its outlet in certain great centers. These solar logoic etheric centers demonstrate through the 7 heavenly men of our solar system. DK says, on the fourth cosmic ether, the Buddhic plane, are found the etheric centers of the logos. There are to be found the esoteric planets and the sun, viewed as the centers of the Buddhic principles, and from thence the logos animates his dense physical manifestation. But just as with a human being, not all the solar logoic centers are found on the Buddhic plane. DK says the 3 higher centers, or the heavenly men who correspond to the head, the heart, and the throat of the solar logos, have their etheric analogies. He doesn't say centers, but we can infer that on the 3 higher etheric levels of the cosmic physical plane, just as the heavenly man who embodies the logoic solar plexus has his manifesting source on the 4th etheric. So most of the solar logoic centers are not given, but Venus, we're told, is the logoic heart center, and thus would demonstrate on the monadic plane. Saturn is the logoic throat center, and thus demonstrates on the atmic plane. As to our Earth, DK says, one of the mysteries revealed in initiation is that of the logoic center, which our scheme represents, and the type of electrical fire which is flowing through it. So that's, there's some reference to the idea that at least temporarily we represent the base of the spine center of the solar logos, but for the most part, these centers are not given. However, Venus and Saturn definitely are given. Next, these centers are again reflected or reproduced in the three worlds of human endeavor. As above, so below. We see this downward reflection here, where the subplane location of the human etheric centers, shown down here, directly corresponds to the location of the logoic etheric centers, right, which are planetary, right? You have given Venus for the heart, and this may just be at this time. This may not be the final heart center of the solar logos, but at this time, it's active in that way. And then Saturn is here, the throat center. And then these are not given, but these are three other planets that represent centers in the solar logos. What's the head center? Well, you know, we could speculate that it's Uranus, given that Saturn is the throat and Venus is the heart. And you wonder, finally, at the end of the solar incarnation, would this not be Neptune rather than Venus? But Venus is the most evolved and the most connected to Sirius at this time. And so it represents this heart center. So the head could be in Uranus. Certainly, finally, I think it is. Temporarily, it could be Vulcan, you know, but it's not given, right? And then the lesser centers are here, and they're not given at all. Okay, let's see. Finally, if the heavenly men therefore have centers on three solar planes, a fact to be remembered. So in contradistinction to the solar logos, who has centers on four etheric planes, right? Here's the centers of a solar logos, here's the centers for a planetary logos. DK describes these planes in the next passage. So can we get a reader, please?
Yeah.
Static plane, the plane of the seven rays. B, on the Buddhic plane, where the masters and their disciples form the 49 centers in the bodies of the seven heavenly men. C, on the fourth etheric physical plane, where the sacred planets, the dense bodies in etheric matter of the heavenly men are to be found. Here again, we can trace back the microcosmic correspondence in the human being. The centers are found on the mental plane, from which originates the impulse for physical plane existence, or the will to incarnate, from whence they can be traced to the astral level, and eventually to the etheric levels, to the fourth ether, where they practically go through the same evolution that the planetary centers went through, and are instrumental in bringing about objectivity, being the four centers.
Thank you, Tia. Okay, we're going to pull the plug